Most of my stops were quiet. Rich houses, empty decks, maybe a dog barking from inside. I showed up, cleaned leaves, checked chemicals, emptied baskets, and left. Half the time, nobody looked at me long enough to remember my face. But this place looked like somebody had kicked the legs out from under it. The pool was half drained. Water sat low against the tile, the skimmer sucking air, and the pump was shrieking because it had lost prime. One wrong move and that whole setup could burn out fast. I dropped my stuff near the pad, killed the system, and finally got a second of silence. Behind me, somebody said, "Please tell me you can fix that." I turned around and saw her. She was standing under the shade of the terrace, one hand around a sweating glass of water, like she'd stepped out of a completely different scene than the one around her. Around 40, maybe, dark hair pinned up without looking too careful about it. Bare feet on the stone. Light dress, expensive without trying too hard. Calm face, but the kind of calm that only shows when somebody is working very hard not to let the whole day get on top of them. I said, "Probably. Depends how long it's been screaming." She looked toward the equipment, then back at me. "Long enough that everyone has mentioned it. Nobody has done anything about it." I nodded. "That sounds right." That got the smallest smile out of her. Real one, quick and tired. I crouched by the pump, checked the lid, checked the valves, traced the problem backward. The water level had dropped too low, and one of the movers had apparently leaned a hand truck against the backwash line and knocked it just enough to cause a slow drain. Not a huge problem by itself, but in that heat, with the system still trying to run, it turned into one fast. While I worked, people kept passing through my view like the background of somebody else's breakup. Framed paintings, garment bags, a rolled rug. One guy asking where the blue chairs were going. Another asking if the upstairs office was cleared. Nobody explained anything to me, which I liked. After a minute, I heard her come closer. "Do you need anything?" she asked. I kept my eyes on the fittings. Maybe 10 minutes without anybody touching this setup. She looked over her shoulder toward the side yard and said, not loudly but in a way that made everyone listen, "No one goes near the pool equipment for 10 minutes. Just like that, the traffic shifted away. I looked up at her then. "That might actually help." "That's what I'm here for," she said. It should have been a normal exchange, but it didn't feel normal. Maybe because she was the only person there not performing panic. Maybe because she was watching me like what I was doing mattered. Most homeowners talk to me while looking at their phone or halfway back to the house. She stayed. I got the line reset, refilled the pump basket, bled the air, and brought the system back online. This time it kicked in smooth. Clean hum. Water started moving the way it should. The return jets pushed a steady flow across the surface, and some of the tension in the yard seemed to loosen with it. I stood up and wiped my hands on a rag. "You're good." Pool dropped low, pump lost prime, backwash line got knocked. It should hold now, but somebody needs to keep people off that valve. She took a sip of water and nodded like she was filing that away with 50 other problems. "And if somebody doesn't? Then I get another exciting afternoon." That smile came back, a little bigger this time. But close, she didn't look fragile. Tired, yeah. Distracted, maybe. But there was something controlled about her, like she'd already made a decision that nobody else around her had caught up to yet. She said, "I'm Celeste. Miles." "Thank you, Miles." It was such a simple thing, hearing my name from somebody like her. But it landed harder than it should have. A man in a blazer came out through the side door holding a folder and asking for her signature. She didn't even turn fully toward him. 2 minutes, she said. He hesitated, then went back inside. She looked at the pool, then at the house like she was measuring both at once. "Everything is leaving at the same time," she said, mostly to herself. I didn't ask what that meant. It wasn't my business. Maybe that was why she kept standing there. Finally she said, "Would you mind checking the lights too, since you're already here?" I should have said I had other stops. I did have other stops. But the way she asked it didn't sound like a rich woman finding extra chores for the pool guy. It sounded like she wanted one more practical reason not to go back inside just yet. "Yeah," I said. "I can check them." She let out a breath that almost sounded like relief. "Good." Then she looked toward the ocean behind the house, bright and flat under the afternoon sun. And for 1 second everything else went quiet again. Movers, staff, paperwork, noise. All of it still happening but not touching her. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just some house getting packed up. Something bigger was ending here. And without really meaning to, I had already stepped into the middle of it. I told myself that place was just another stop. That lasted maybe 2 days. On the schedule, the property came back up for a follow-up check because the water level had dipped again after the system restart. Normal enough. At least that's what I told myself when I turned off the highway and took the coast road out there. But the second I saw the white walls of that house above the bluff, I knew I was lying. I was curious. Not just about the pool. About the whole strange pull of that afternoon. About the woman who had stood in the middle of a house coming apart and somehow looked steadier than anyone else in it. This time the driveway was quieter. No moving truck. No people crossing in front of me with lamps and boxes. Just one black SUV near the garage and the distant sound of the ocean hitting the rocks below. A few big planters had already been cleared from the front steps, and the place somehow looked larger because of it, like empty space was spreading through it. I grabbed my kit and headed through the side gate. The pool was fine. Water level steady. Filters running smooth. I checked the chemistry, emptied one basket, and looked over the lights like I'd promised. One of them had a wiring issue, but nothing urgent. I was halfway through putting everything back when I heard footsteps on the terrace above me. "You came back," she said. I looked up. She was leaning one shoulder against the railing, coffee mug in one hand, dark glasses pushed up into her hair. No staff around. No papers. No performance. Just her, looking down at me like she'd actually been hoping I'd show up. "I said I would," I told her. "That already makes you unusual. If the story is already pulling you in, hit subscribe and drop a like. Takes 2 seconds and it means everything." I laughed once. "That bad? You have no idea." She came down the steps slowly, not dressed for company. Just loose white pants and a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Rich houses usually made me more aware of where I stood, what my boots tracked in, how much everything around me cost. Around her. That feeling didn't disappear exactly, but it loosened. I told her about the light and the wiring. She listened like it mattered. Then she asked, "Coffee?" I looked at the truck parked beyond the hedges. I had one more job after this, but not for a while. "Sure," I said. She nodded once like she'd expected that answer. We sat at a small table on the back terrace facing the water. Up close, the house looked even stranger than before. You could see outlines on the walls where paintings had been. A corner inside the sliding doors where a big chair used to sit. The place wasn't messy. It was too clean for messy. It looked edited. She handed me a mug and sat across from me. For a minute neither of us said much. I was used to silence around clients, but not this kind. This wasn't awkward. It felt more like standing in the shallow end before deciding whether to go farther. Finally she said, "Do you always keep to yourself this much?" "Pretty much. That's rare here. Most people don't hire me for conversation." That made her smile into the mug. "Maybe that's why I like talking to you." I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't have one, but because almost anything I said would have sounded bigger than the moment. The breeze off the water moved a few loose strands of hair across her face, and she tucked them back without thinking. It was such a small thing, but I noticed it. She noticed me noticing. Not in a dramatic way, just a tiny pause. A look that held half a second longer than it needed to. Then she looked toward the house and said, "Do you know what people do when they realize you're changing your life?" "No. They make it about themselves." There was no bitterness in the way she said it. That almost made it heavier. I leaned back in the chair. That what all that was the other day? Part of it. She took another sip and glanced through the glass doors behind us. Some things are being sold. Some are being sent away. Some should have left years ago. I looked in the same direction. "You don't sound sad about it." "I'm tired," she said. "That's different." That line stayed with me. I finished the coffee, stood, and told her I should get moving. I thought that would be it. Nice weird moment, then back to regular life. But when I reached the terrace steps, she called after me. "Miles." I turned. "Can you come by Friday?" she asked. "The grounds lights near the lower path have been flickering too. I'd rather have one person look at everything than explain it to three." It was believable, maybe even true, but the way she asked made it feel like the lights were only half the reason. "Yeah," I said. "Friday works. Late afternoon? Okay." By Friday, I was thinking about it more than I should have been. That visit ran longer. The lower path lights did need work, so I spent an hour down by the bluff tracing lines through the landscaping while the sky started turning gold over the water. When I came back up, the back of the house was open, music low inside somewhere, and she was standing barefoot at the pool's edge with 2 glasses on the table beside her. "You're still here," I said. "It's my house," she said, then gave me that look again. For the moment, I should have left right there. I knew that. Instead, I set my tool bag down and walked over. We talked while the light faded. Not about big things at first. Little things. Where I grew up. How long I'd been doing pool work. Why she liked the coast even when the wind got mean in winter. She was funny in a dry, quiet way that kept catching me off guard. And every time I forgot the gap between our lives, something small pulled me back in the other direction. The way she listened. The way she didn't rush to fill silence. The way the whole place felt less like a rich woman's property and more like a temporary world the two of us had stepped into by accident. By the time the staff had cleared out and the last car rolled away from the front drive, neither of us had moved. The pool lights came on under the water, blue against the dark. She looked at them, then at me. "Stay a little." I did. And sometime in that slow, quiet stretch after sunset, sitting beside a half-empty house with the ocean below us and nobody else around, I stopped feeling like a guy she'd called back for maintenance. I started feeling like she wanted me there. The first time I stayed past midnight, it didn't feel planned. I'd come by late to check a pressure drop she mentioned over text. That alone should have told me things had changed, because a few weeks earlier there was no version of my life where a woman like her was texting me directly about anything. But by then that had started feeling normal. She'd send a short message. I find a reason to stop by. Sometimes the equipment actually needed attention. Sometimes it barely did. Either way, I kept ending up there. That night the house was even barer than before. The big mirror in the entry was gone. So were 2 long benches from the hall. When I passed the dining room, only the table was left, sitting there under the light like somebody had forgotten to take the center of the room with everything else. Even my footsteps sounded different, sharper, like the place was already becoming an echo. I fixed the pressure issue in 20 minutes. Dirty basket, small air leak, nothing major. When I came back up from the equipment pad, I figured I'd say goodnight and go. Instead, I found her in the kitchen with a bottle of wine open and 3 cardboard boxes on the floor beside the island. She looked up and said, "Perfect timing. I've reached the part where I can't decide what stays." I leaned against the doorway. "That seems above my pay grade." "Exactly why you're useful," she said. "You don't treat objects like they have a board of directors." I laughed and walked in. The boxes were a weird mix. Cookbooks, old framed photos turned face down, heavy serving pieces, a stack of records, small things wrapped in dish towels. I picked one up and she said, "Keep, donate, or throw away. You want me to choose?" "I want someone to choose." So that's what we did. First it was a joke. I'd hold something up, she'd give me a look, and I'd put it in a pile. But after a while it stopped feeling like sorting stuff and started feeling like being let into a private room in her head. Every item had some tiny story attached to it. Not big speeches, just little lines. Bought in Rome. Never liked it. Wedding gift. Used once. Hid that in the back because I hated it on sight. A few times I caught myself focusing less on the things and more on her face when she said stuff like that. She wasn't sentimental the way I expected. She was almost clear-eyed about it, like she'd been carrying too much for too long and was finally tired of pretending it all mattered. At one point I picked up a silver frame. "This one." She looked at it for maybe 2 seconds. "No. Donate. Throw away." I hesitated. "You sure?" Her eyes met mine. Very. I dropped it into the box. Something shifted after that. Not in the room exactly. In the distance between us. The music playing from somewhere in the living room had gone low and slow. The ocean was just a dark sound beyond the glass. She moved around the island to take a bottle opener from my hand. And when she did, her fingers brushed mine and stayed there a second too long. Neither of us said anything. She looked down first, then let out this quiet breath like she was annoyed with herself for even noticing. "You should probably go," she said. But she didn't move away. I said, "Do you want me to?" That made her look back up. For a second I thought I'd pushed too far. Then she smiled, small and tired and honest. "No," she said. After that, it happened in the simplest way possible. No big speech. No dramatic step toward each other. She just stood there with one hand still near mine, and I stepped closer, slowly enough to stop if she wanted. She didn't. When I kissed her, she answered right away, like we'd both been holding that moment off and were done pretending we weren't. Everything after that felt quiet. Not rushed. Not careless. Just close. The kind of closeness that makes the whole house disappear for a while. At some point we ended up out on the terrace, then later in one of the rooms at the back of the house where the curtains were still up and the lamp was still there and almost everything else had already been taken. Even then I noticed what was missing. Bare shelves. Empty corners. Closet doors open with almost nothing inside. But I didn't understand what I was looking at. Not really. Lying there later, with the window cracked and the salt air moving through the room, I asked, "When does all this end?" I meant the sale, the packing, the strange half-life the house was in. She was quiet for long enough that I turned to look at her. "Soon," she said. That word hit me harder than it should have. I propped myself up on one elbow. "Soon like next month?" She gave me a look I still think about. Soft but guarded too. Why does it matter? Because I was already in too deep. Because this no longer felt like some private thing floating outside real life. Because being with her had started to rearrange my week, my head, the way I woke up. But I didn't say any of that. I just said, "I was wondering." She reached over and touched my chest once. Light, almost calming me down before I'd fully let myself get worked up. "Don't do that," she said. "Do what?" "Try to turn this into a map." I frowned. Maybe I just want to know where I am. For the first time all night, she looked older than she had before. Not less beautiful, just more tired. Like there were whole conversations inside her she had no intention of letting out. "You're here," she said quietly. That should be enough. I wanted it to be enough. That was the problem. Over the next week, I kept noticing more. The upstairs rooms closing one by one. Fewer dishes in the kitchen. Fewer towels by the pool. A closet near the back stairs completely empty except for one hanger swinging when the air hit it. She kept calling me over and I kept going, and every time I did, I saw another sign that this wasn't a pause. It was a countdown. I saw it. I just didn't let myself add it up. The day it ended, I knew something was wrong before I even reached the gate. There were no cars in the front drive. No staff. No gardener near the hedges. No delivery van by the side entrance. Just my truck, the wind off the water, and that strange kind of silence big houses only have when they stop belonging to anyone. I sat there for a second with the engine off, looking at the place. It didn't look dead. It looked finished. That was worse. I got out and went through the side gate with my bag over my shoulder, almost out of habit. Part of me still expected to hear her call from the terrace, or see a coffee mug on the table, or find some small reason she'd asked me to come by. The last message from her had been short. Just, "Can you stop by this afternoon? One more thing before closing up." Closing up. I should have understood that better than I did. The pool was running, clear and perfectly balanced, like the only thing on the property still doing exactly what it was supposed to do. No leaves in the water. No towels on the chairs. No glass on the terrace table. Even the cushions had been taken in. The whole backyard looked staged for a photo after the people had been erased out of it. "Celeste," I called once. Nothing. I went up to the terrace and tried the back door. Unlocked. That hit me harder than it should have. She was careful about everything. The fact that it was open made the whole place feel even emptier. Like there was no point locking a house that was already passing into someone else's hands. Inside, my footsteps echoed. The kitchen island was bare. The bowls, the bottles, the half-open boxes, all of it gone. The dining room table that had stood there by itself was gone too. So was the lamp from the back room. So was the last little warmth that had made the house feel like hers even while it was being stripped down. I moved through it slowly, room by room, like I was looking for proof I'd gotten the day wrong. Living room, empty. Hall, empty. Upstairs, worse. The bedroom where we'd stayed that night had only a mattress cover folded against the wall and a pale rectangle where the headboard used to be. Closet open. Nothing inside. Bathroom shelves cleared off so completely they looked unfamiliar. It was all so clean it almost felt rude. Like I'd shown up after the story had already decided I wasn't part of the last page. I stood in the middle of that room for a second and finally let myself understand it. She hadn't been hesitating. She had been leaving. From the first day. From the pump screaming, the movers in the yard, the art coming off the walls, the boxes in the kitchen, the rooms closing one by one. I'd seen every piece of it and still built my own version over the top because being with her felt better than asking what it was. I went back downstairs slower. There was one thing left in the kitchen. A small white envelope on the counter, set right in the center where I couldn't miss it. My name on the front in her handwriting. Miles. That was all. I picked it up and just stood there with it in my hand, already knowing that whatever was inside wasn't going to be enough and wanting it anyway. The note was short. That somehow made it land even harder. Thank you for being the only easy thing here. What we had was real to me. Please don't come looking for a version of this that keeps going. It was never built for that. You made this ending warmer than it had any right to be. See, I read it twice, then one more time slower. No address, no number I didn't already have, no promise, no maybe, not even the kind of soft line people leave when they want the door cracked open just enough to feel better about walking through their own. Just the truth finally clean and sharp. What we had was real, and she was still gone. I looked around the kitchen again, at the late sun coming in across the empty counters, at the ocean light moving through the glass, at the outline on the floor where the table had stood. For weeks I'd felt like I'd been led into some hidden part of her life. Standing there, I understood it better. I hadn't been stepping into her future. I'd been standing inside her goodbye. She knew she was leaving the whole time. I just didn't want to see it. Would you have walked away sooner? Or would you have done the same thing I did? Tell me below. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. Then I walked out through the open back door, past the still water, past the silent chairs, down the side path to my truck. When I started the engine, I looked at the house one last time. Nothing moved. That was the hardest part. Not that she left. That by the time I understood what we were, she already had.